Next up on This Week in Law, we're going to get personal with Josh Galper from Personal.com. We're going to talk a lot about personal data management and ownership and control. We're going to talk about Minority Report kind of ads, whether or not Shell is prepared, net regulation, and lots more. Evan Brown is here too, and Steven Zralek joined me as well. We're looking forward to having you here on This Week in Law.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiL, This Week in Law with Denise, Howell, and Evan Brown, episode 172, recorded July 20th, 2012, for July 27th. Can you beer me now? This episode of This Week in Law is brought to you by the new Squarespace. Squarespace introduces a new content management system, making it faster and easier to create a high-quality website or blog. Plus more than 50 new features, including mobile responsive designs with automatic device scaling. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com and use offer code TWiL7. Hello, I'm Denise Howell, and you're joining us for This Week in Law. We've got an excellent panel here today, all kinds of interesting things to discuss. Someone I met recently and am glad to see again, Josh Galper, who is the Chief Policy Officer and General Counsel of Personal.com. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Denise. Good to see you again. Good to see you, Evan, and good to meet you, Steven.
Same.
Josh is in Washington, D.C., and is paying attention to lots of policy issues related to personal data and its use, because that's what his company is all about. So we're going to get into that shortly. Also joining us from Nashville, Tennessee, is Steven Zralek. Hello, Steven.
How are you? Good to be with you.
Great to see you, too. Steven is a lawyer who does IP and technology issues, so we're glad to have you on the show with us.
Good to be here.
And joining us once again is Evan Brown from Chicago, Illinois. Illinois. Hello,
Chicago,
Evan.
Illinois. Yeah, very good to see you, Denise. Looking forward to our conversation. It ought to be a fun one.
Illinois. It is going to be a fun one. Josh,
Already
are,
you know.
I know. What could be more fun than chatting about tech law and policy on a Friday afternoon? Josh, you're in an industry that I think is just darn fascinating. The industry of our personal data and how we can control it and what others can do with it. Tell us about Personal.com.
Absolutely. And thanks again for this opportunity. And Evan, I'm actually from the Chicago area myself, so I'm especially pleased to have this appearance with you where you're based. Cool. So Personal is an internet startup based in Washington, D.C. that gives you a data vault where you can put all of the digital details of your life to store, to manage, to organize, to share, and ultimately get economic and non-economic benefit from your data. It is a company that allows you to build a personal private network on top of your data vault with that data that you store there. And what we're seeing, just for the larger context that I think might be helpful for people to understand, is a world where, on one side, individuals are not trusting of the online world. I think at this point that kind of pronouncement is sort of a cliche. There's a lack of transparency, a lack of security, a lack of privacy, a lack of understanding what is happening to our data online. And from the individual perspective, there's this lack of control that goes along with it. And on the other side of the ledger, we've got a situation where companies are doing all kinds of things with our data, analyzing it, using it, monetizing it, aggregating it, putting it to uses that, again, we don't have as individuals transparency into because we're not in on that big data conversation. The other points I think that are important to mention are that for companies, what you find is that they really don't feel that they have the accurate, complete data set about individuals, that information that they want to know in order to use it in the first place. And consequently, too, they're not having the kind of rich good relationships that they would like to have with their customers because of the profiling and the kind of practices that I've just referred to, which leads to really inefficient ad spending on their part to reach individuals instead of hearing from them what they want. So you've got this situation where on both sides there are just enormous problems, and that is causing a seismic shift where the currency of data is concerned, and that's led to a perfect storm of scrutiny, certainly here in Washington and across the states, and then also internationally and in the media. So those are just a few words, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you a question such as, why would someone trust personal.com over someone like Facebook? But I think we all know the answer to that question. I mean, we've just seen so many stumbles with the social media sites and the way they handle data that, of course, there is a role for, assuming that a company such as yours or several companies such as yours can establish the trust that they need in the marketplace for people to use them like a bank and then spend their data the same way, they spend their money. So instead of asking you that, although if you want to address that, go right ahead.
Well, I'd love to, because what it comes down to in terms of what you're able to do on personal, it's a place to own and control your data. And right now, when you talk about the social networks and search engines and all the places where your data goes as you're on the internet, you don't have that opportunity to own and control your data and to know every step of the way what you are doing with your information. There certainly is a rising sector that is addressing this issue at different points along the spectrum. At Personal, we have gone straight for the ownership and control part of that, and the ability to build that private personal network on top of it so that you can know every step of the way where you're sharing that data to get all the benefit that you deserve to get out of your data.
May I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely. Go right ahead, Stephen.
Josh, it sounds like a phenomenal idea. It reminds me a little bit of, and I know it's not just an idea, I know it's in practice these days, but it reminds me of this story that NPR ran, I think 2 nights ago, if any of you heard it on the way home, about the sale of human tissue. Did anybody hear that story?
No.
No, bring us up to speed.
About organ donors. All of us on the back of our licenses were asked, at least in Tennessee, do you want to be an organ donor? And I think a lot of people say yes. And you think of that, but really there's a lot more money in human tissue, or plenty of money in human tissue. And people often, after their loved ones die, they get a call, do you want to donate the tissue? And there's this huge aftermarket. And the value of all the human tissue in a human body is about $80,000 right now. And I don't think anybody has that. Nobody knows that. And yet most of the time when people call and they say, do you want to donate the human tissue of your deceased loved one, they don't disclose that it's for profit. And I think our personal information, we're always giving it away online right now. We're going to the web. We're going there for free. It looks too good to be true. We don't realize that every time as consumers we go online, we're leaving these trails, we're leaving these cookies about what we're doing, our preferences, all of that. And I like the idea that somebody or a company like Personal could help us gain more control over that. But my question is, and it reminds me of the human tissue, people don't know this, but Josh, is it a way that you gain exclusive control and ownership over that, or is it just a way to monetize it while companies are still collecting it and monetizing it for you behind the scenes?
Well, to begin with, we certainly, I would take exception to comparing the monetization of your data to something like organ donation, because the magical thing about data is that it's something that belongs to you that can be repurposed really in limitless ways. If you can properly leverage it with the right security and privacy protections, it's something that can open up whole new worlds of possibilities. But in terms of a few different aspects of your question. First of all, when you are on Personal, it is absolutely correct that you are owning your data. What does that mean? When you become a registered user at Personal, you sign a legal agreement called the Owner Data Agreement, and you can think of it almost as a reverse type of privacy policy, where we're turning the tables on the conventional notion of what happens when you are inputting data into a service or product. What the agreement says is that it's really a dialogue from you, the individual user, to the company saying, I own the data that I put into Personal. You, Personal, can't monetize my data or do anything else with my data without my permission. You can't share my data without my permission. The whole platform is built with a security and privacy by design architecture from the beginning, so that it is truly driven and centered around the user, and that every step of the way you understand what is happening with your data. Now, when it comes down to ownership, and I think this was the last part of your question, ownership is always a complicated term in the law. We have a view that ownership means that something, yes, does belong to you, that you have the right to own and have belong to you. But there can be joint management rights of that piece of information. If you think about real property and easements and the kinds of things that don't necessarily go to absolute ownership of something, you look at data and you realize that perhaps 95% of the data in your life is not created by you, but it is used by you. That's certainly a philosophy that we have, and you should have a right to not only access that data, but in all these cases be able to possess it in a way that you can use. And that's how we look at ownership here at Personal.
Josh,
see, that's really an interesting concept, this whole idea of owning data. And from a philosophical perspective, I would suggest that the metaphor with real property might break down pretty quickly, because if you're talking about in real property, say it's like a lease where you sign an agreement with the landlord and you have this apartment for a year, and then after a year you have to vacate the property and you don't have it anymore, or an easement, you have the right to walk across somebody's field to access your barn or whatever, but if that easement is taken away, you can't do that anymore. With information, once information is obtained by another party, unlike moving out of the apartment, the information cannot be unlearned or unknown. I guess it can be deleted from the database, but it's still there and it's still subject to, remaining outside of the exclusive control of the party that purportedly owns it. How would you respond to that? That observation about the distinction between ownership of things where the concept of ownership is very clear, and the concept of ownership of information, which is still something that a lot of people need some convincing on.
Sure. Well, like I said, it's not a perfect analogy, but I think what you're really honing in on is this idea of alienability of property, that you can somehow, get rid of it in the real property context. On the data context, I mean, it's a very complicated issue in terms of how you can jointly manage something, have access to something, but sometimes don't have editing rights to something. But at the end of the day, there is a value exchange that an individual should have for their data. We see it every day as we're monetized by companies. We know through some public companies how much it is monetized. To the amount of money per user in terms of revenue per year. And that gets down to a property interest because it is an asset. In fact, the World Economic Forum has been calling data a new economic class, and it's something that can be exchanged and monetized at the end of the day. So it's natural for people to think that they're sitting upon a resource that they can actually put to work for them. And what we're doing is giving them a place to actually do that.
Josh, what kind of headway are you making with the big folks that have our data now, Google, Facebook, others in that realm?
Well, what we're finding is that companies, and so taking the search engines, say, and the social networks out of your question, but when you look at marketers and companies, retailers, those who are trying to reach us in a way that they will actually attract our eyeballs and our wallets. They want a different way of doing business. What they're finding is that there is a huge, severe lack of trust from customers to them online. And that means that they're not making as much money as they could. They're also spending money inefficiently to reach these individuals through online campaigns, through platforms that we all know about, the social networks and the search engines. And they want a new way of reaching people. And what I think they're realizing, and I'm talking about the largest telcos, the largest financial institutions, the largest healthcare companies, is that they would do a lot better. We would all do a lot better if they were able to be told by the individual what it is they're seeking, instead of trying to figure it out through all the ways that they're doing to push, in essence, the customers away at the end of the day.
Right. And I think people have this degree of mistrust about the various data handlers that we have to deal with in today's ecosystem. So I think that, as companies like yours come to the play, we will start to see these dynamics shift. We have a story in our rundown today about Facebook looking into the Minority Report kind of ad that's going to know your whereabouts and target you that way. Josh, maybe you could comment on how a location-aware ad would work in the ecosystem of personal.
Thanks. It's a great question, and I read those stories with great interest. Look, how it would work in our ecosystem versus the world as we know it now. It's about the owner having, or the person who's the user, having a degree of control over being reached. And if you know what's going on, if you are in on the conversation, there should be nothing wrong with it. You should be able to opt into this, though. It should be a choice. You should have that ability to be able to receive those ads. If you don't, there's a creepy feeling that I think we all have on our mobile devices, even today, as people ask for a location data, or you don't even realize that you gave your location data at some time before. You should have your own control settings on your end and be able to turn it on and off as you please. Mm-hmm.
Right. I've noticed it was back at the conference we attended when I fired up Personal and saw that you could, it asked for, various parts of information that you might never be inclined to put into the other folks out there that are gathering data about us, such as your beer preference, for example. So, if you've alerted advertisers to the fact that you're a real microbrew enthusiast and you're wandering around in the world, it might be very welcome to have pop up in front of you that, a great little brew pub is right around the corner and you should go check it out.
That's exactly right. You should have that data aggregated in a place where you could actually share it. So like your beer list, you should be able to not only put the data in there because maybe you want to share it with friends, family. They know that you're a beer maven. They want to follow the kind of beers that you like to drink. But you should be able to have that on button to speak to the outside world, to a marketer if you want, to say, hey, here are the beers that I like. Can you make me an offer? And at any time, you should be able to revoke access to that data. And that's the kind of platform that we've built based on permissions, giving the user control.
And I guess part of the theory would be that if you say that you like microbrew pubs, microbreweries, you are implicitly notifying Anheuser-Busch not to market to you. So you're saving their marketing dollars, increasing their profit margins so you can get Budweiser cheaper, at the grocery store, right? Does it extrapolate out to those levels where it's, saving, helping those market to you by not marketing to you at all, certain entities?
No, that's exactly right, Evan. And there's the other side to that equation. And I should just say the marketplace is not unveiled yet where you can actually do this with marketers, but we will have that soon. But the other side of the ledger there is for those microbrews that you do want speaking to you, giving you offers, they're going to have an incentive to really channel their advertising dollars that they currently spend quite inefficiently into discounts and great offers for you. There's going to be an incentive that they have to compete for the thing that you are telling them that they want.
Josh, I read on the personal site that personal will take 10%. Is that right? And that's the revenue. And that may be incorrect. Maybe I read that incorrectly. But is personal setting up just sort of a forum so that if I enter my favorite beers or my favorite hotels and I then monetize it, that it's up to me to monetize it with the potential buyer? Or does personal also set up the pay scale?
So great question. Let me back up for a second to say that, right now what we offer is the life management platform to aggregate all this information and to put it to use through sharing of, say, passwords, the sharing of things that you're interested in, to make sure that you've got all the data in your life that's all over all kinds of silos in one place to bring it together. The kinds of uses also that are coming out very soon are form filling, to take that data and be able to reuse it for the forms that burden us throughout our life every day, whether it's for a kid's school or for an insurance application or going to the doctor for the first time. The use cases there are completely, again, limitless. When it comes to the marketplace, and we'll have a premium services, a range of premium services offering as well. When it comes to the marketplace, it really starts with your gems. Those are the bundles of data within your data vault where you keep information according to various topics. And the idea is that you would be granting access to that information to our corporate partners who are part of this marketplace, meaning that they are meeting certain privacy and security standards that we will expect of them. And they will make offers to you. And they're making this based really on the merits, on just the data that you provide anonymously, without your name, without your email address. And what will happen is that the value of providing that data will be realized through the discounts or cash back that you receive. We are completely aligned as agents of the individual's data with the individual, so that the 5 to 15% that's discussed on the website is really about a percentage of the value realized, not of the price of the good or service being sold. So that's kind of a sketch of how it would work.
Well, I think it's just a fascinating arena to be in, Josh, and you're right where I think the future of advertising and marketing and personal data security all intersect. Nobody thinks that the world as it's functioning today is working very well, especially when you factor into that not only is Facebook looking at being able to target us with location-aware ads, but we talked about a few weeks back, looking into having kids under 13 on the site. So we're going to need better solutions, and we're glad to have had the opportunity today to explore what you guys are up to. We're going to keep paying attention to it. Right now, I want to take a break and thank our sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law. We're here with Josh Galper from Personal.com and Steven Zralek and Evan Brown and me. And we're only here because we've got Squarespace.com in our corner. And I'm really excited to tell you, and I'm really excited to try it myself, that there's a brand new Squarespace in town. They've launched a new content management system. It's called the New Squarespace. And from a technical perspective, the New Squarespace is an entirely new product with a different code base. It uses the latest web technologies for speed and flexibility for future development. And from a user perspective, the New Squarespace gives you and your website users the best mobile experience possible. It's developed new templates with mobile-ready responsive designs. Your site automatically restructures to any size device. So it looks professionally designed no matter how it is viewed. How welcome is that? You're constantly moving between screens. It's not going to matter if your site is hosted on Squarespace. The designs are seamlessly and transparently baked into each master template. The images are automatically versioned 7 different ways to accommodate viewing, editing, and updating on any sized mobile device. And it's faster and easier than ever. It has beautiful templates with 100% drag and drop functionality for all customization tools. There's a new page builder tool called the Layout Engine that enables you to customize pages in seconds by adding blocks of content like photos, videos, text, social media, etc. And it gives you better social media integration. Lord knows we all are using all these services, and you need to be able to reference them on your site. Well, with the new Squarespace, you can automatically import, sync, and publish to and from social media with just a few clicks, dynamically refreshing your site content and raising awareness in your social circles. It also is exceptionally well designed. It has an award-winning design team and user experience experts. They've created a whole new set of sophisticated design templates. They reflect modern web style using only highly intuitive navigation. Each template has hundreds of customization options available to change the grid, the layout, the colors. You can make your site exactly what you want. It has over 300 fonts and much more. It integrates all your website needs: domain registration, design, development, hosting, and customer support. It's a unified service, making it faster and easier than ever to create a high-quality website or blog, and it offers over 50 new and improved features. So you've got to go try it. Go to squarespace.com. If you're not already an account holder, you can sign up for a free account. You don't need a credit card. Just try it out. Start building your own website. Then when you decide to purchase, because I think you will, use the offer code TWiL7 and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. New Squarespace accounts, including monthly and annual plans. And don't forget about the free domain registration with annual subscriptions. That's squarespace.com. Use the offer code TWiL7. And current customers can convert their accounts and content to the new Squarespace whenever they choose, or they can keep their site in the current Squarespace code. So you've got all the flexibility you need, and we're thrilled that Squarespace is a sponsor of This Week in Law. We thank them so much for their support. All right, guys. Well, let's talk for a moment about net regulation in the election year, because it seems like in the wake of the SOPA protests, et cetera, people are actually paying attention to how the web is regulated as we hone in on the November elections. Ron Paul has a whole campaign going where he is very anti any internet regulation whatsoever, sort of a hands-off approach. Republicans have been accusing the FCC of hypocrisy on internet freedom as they take various actions. And, of course, the Ron Paul type supporters and other conservatives are painting the White House as being very broad internet regulators, and perhaps that theme will come out more as the election cycle progresses toward the end here. Stephen, are you paying attention to all of this, and are you surprised to see the internet actually coming up in the presidential policy kind of discussions?
I mean, I think if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said, yes, I'm surprised. After the SOPA, PIPA, and then the arrest of Kim.com over in Auckland, New Zealand, I think I'm a little bit less surprised. I'm not surprised that Ron Paul has taken a very libertarian position of hands-off. And I guess just to temper all of this, I would say that I think that, and you all may be more up on this than I am, but I know a week ago it was announced that big media and so sort of like the search engines, technology, and entertainment, the leaders were trying to get together, I think, within the past week to hammer out some compromise, because obviously it's to both of their benefit to have some regulation, because like the modern day content providers are not just entertainment companies, but they're also the Googles of the world. And so this is where copyright does come into play, where I think that a lot of people that jumped on the bandwagon and opposed internet regulation, it's very easy to do that until you own your own content, right? Until you create something, you create a song worth value, you create an art piece worth value, and then it changes for a lot of people, and then they think, oh, I really do like copyright protection, and it's benefiting me. And so from my perspective, we're just seeing what always takes place, where there's a new technology and it takes a while for the law to catch up. And it's constantly happening. We've got personal is going to be pushing the boundaries of the law. It's going to be pushing the law to catch up. What are the privacy? Do we have any regulation around this at all or not? So the courts are slow to catch up also, and I'm not surprised that the public is chiming in and that politicians see that they can grab a hold of this and generate a little bit of passion one way or the other around the issue.
Yeah, I do think that you hit the nail on the head when you talked about people realizing that they may have rights and interests that deserve protecting that are not something they've traditionally thought about, such as in their personal data. I also think it's instructive that Josh here is not only general counsel for his company, but the chief policy officer. And I think we're seeing more and more of that role becoming integral in both startups and established companies. Do you agree, Josh?
I absolutely do. And, I would say just one quick response to Stephen is that the way that we look at privacy is very much in keeping with where regulators and policymakers want to go, not only in the United States, but around the world. When people talk about privacy by design, control of data, again, though, it's an example, and I think you're totally right, of innovation being ahead of policy. Fortunately, it's one, though, that at least gives a guidepost to where they're going. But I think you're totally right, Denise, that just as Wall Street came to Washington in the financial crisis, I think more and more Silicon Valley is coming to Washington. And when you talk about the sort of activity we've seen this election year, it is absolutely, I think, active on many different fronts. And it's also infused with a lot of partisanship. And I actually think that's pretty unfortunate. I think a lot of these issues can often be resolved in a nonpartisan way. Privacy is one that I think has pretty famously been a bipartisan approach. When it comes to national security and law enforcement issues where that's concerned, it can sometimes fall away. But, you look at all the different manifestos that have been produced. I think some of them have ideas that merit some, real substantive, review and have great potential. But unfortunately, they're often cloaked in name calling and, not really the most practical path to actually get something done here. And I can say that. I've been in Washington. It's very hot here. And we know there's a lot of hot air in D.C.
Yes, to say the least.
One more thing I want to throw out is that our nation, just thinking about sort of the different revolutions that have taken place, the Industrial Revolution, the labor, manufacturing, our country, our economy is based so much on our ideas, on our innovation, right? We export our culture and our innovation around the world. And to me, it's really all American to want to protect our economy, to want to protect these ideas. And the idea that we're also going to regulate the web, I think that those words scare people, and they think it's like the communist leaders in China shutting down free speech. And I don't think that's what either leading party in Congress wants to do. I think maybe I'm reading their interest too benevolently, but I truly believe that the interest is in how do we protect the American economy, how do we protect the health and safety of our country, and how do we protect these big resources in our country. And so much of it is really focused on international issues, not just on domestic issues when it's coming to regulating and protecting the web.
Mm-hmm.
So, Evan, I think we're going to make our first MCLE passphrase of the show Beer Me in honor of our earlier microbrewing discussion and the functionality in personal. I'm wondering, on the subject of the election year and policy issues, if you think that the economy is just so much in everybody's mind as they consider what to do come November. If you think that the internet is now such an integral part of the economy that these issues are going to be on people's minds as well.
Well, I tell you what, I'm glad you made Beer Me the passphrase, because I definitely need a beer after thinking about all this, regulation, high level stuff.
Yes.
This is complicated. And I think one thing to go to your question, I think one thing that really makes this more complex than a lot of the issues that we discuss is that it doesn't break down very clearly on partisan lines based on principle. I mean, certainly we see divisions along partisan lines on certain issues, but I get the sense that that's more just because of which party, for example, the FCC commissioner came to power under. What I'm talking about specifically is Republicans accusing Chairman Janikowski of a little bit of hypocrisy when he says that the FCC should have broad powers to regulate the internet, whereas at the same time there should be less concern along those lines when it comes to international control along those things. I would be surprised to see any data that would suggest that voters are all that influenced by a candidate's position on technology policy when deciding to make a decision on who to vote for. There's no doubt that the visibility of these issues got a lot more attention back in January, when things really came to a head with SOPA and PIPA, like January 18th, that day where the internet went dark and mainstream America really started paying attention to these issues. I have a feeling that the issues of technology policy are pretty low on the list and wouldn't have much power to swing a vote one way or the other. But that's not to say that these issues aren't increasing in importance, and that as politicians and special interests and legacy content owners, legacy copyright owners like big media continue to exert their influence and direct policy in a certain way, along with the fact that technology, both the internet and also mobile technology, as it becomes more a part of how we interact with one another, how we engage in commerce, how we entertain ourselves, that these issues, in as much as they drive the economy, can have an effect, but primarily the overall state of the economy, jobs, national security, military spending, social issues like gay rights, abortion, those things are for a while going to be continuing to stay higher on the list of what people choose a candidate to vote for over. That's me. That's just me talking here. I'm just a simple observer here.
All right. Well, we appreciate those observations. I want to get into talking about, you guys remember the BP Global PR Twitter account that was tweeting out making light of a heavy situation during the Gulf oil spill. Apparently, Greenpeace has taken that strategy to heart. And because it is opposed to Shell Oil's soon-to-be activities in the Arctic, drilling in the Arctic, they have an Arctic-ready website and are doing their own PR efforts to tell the public, in their own words, what's going to be going on up there. This comes from Cash Hill, a nice story about this, one of our good friends of the show, former guest. She says, Greenpeace has apparently discovered that it's far more effective to ram Shell online than to send its Greenpeace boats out to protest or to handcuff themselves to drilling equipment in the snow. Combining a fake corporate site with a fake corporate reaction seems to legitimize the content and convince or at least confuse most people on Twitter who have limited attention spans. Now, what she's referring to is a faux Shell social media team that is tweeting at Shell is prepared, all one word, and that will be our second MCLE passphrase for the show, Shell is prepared. Basically, smearing Shell and saying things that are confusing a lot of people out there and saying there's no way that Shell has been actually tweeting this. And of course, Shell hasn't. So again, as Cash points out, it's a difficult situation for Shell and for the law. Is this a parody? Is it free speech? Is it corporate identity theft? Stephen, you wanted to talk a bit about the evolving law of social media. Here, Twitter's terms have barred people from impersonating other individuals or entities in their accounts, yet this account is still up. What do you think of all this?
Well, it is interesting. I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of talking about, is it parody, is it free speech? And I think there's a difference between openly criticizing, and adopting or impersonating and sending out sort of a false image. And so it strikes me that if you could get to the bottom of who's posting it, that you may have an unfair competition claim. But I'm also trying to think back, and you guys may have paid attention more in history class than I did, but I'm sure there's some great examples of people over the centuries, even probably from the founding of our country, where politically, and it's political speech probably, people impersonate those that they don't like and speak as if they are the character. And it's sort of rogue speech, but I think that's the question here. Does it amount to political speech? Is it free speech or not? And it very well may.
So Greenpeace some of the things they're doing are posting up pictures of cute little Arctic foxes, and apparently "Let's go" is one of their mottos for drilling in the Arctic. So we have the cute Arctic fox running across the tundra, and the caption says, "You can't run your SUV on cute. Let's go." Various other ads that they're, if you're not careful, if you're not paying attention, you might think are actually emanating from Shell, and that's why eyebrows are being raised here. Evan, I think it's just a question of, yes, these tactics are effective and funny and they draw attention to it. Shell probably doesn't want to respond too much because they'll bring down the Streisand effect and, draw even more criticism and scrutiny on themselves. But don't you think that if you're going to do this kind of thing, you have to be really clear that we are not Shell? Or does that make it lose its effect?
Oh, I guess so. Shell is the world's largest company in terms of revenue. Last year, it made over $400 billion. Do you really think they care all that much? You're like, we're Shell, So maybe the real analysis for this should be done in some situation where there really is a company that might feel like it's victimized. And I don't know, maybe Shell's legal department, outside counsel, is preparing a lawsuit right now, or maybe they've even filed one or whatever. So maybe I'm understating how hurt Shell's feelings might be. But they kind of have a hard exterior. Never mind. Okay, so what I think the real the interesting point here when it comes to the question of, is there some kind of misuse, misappropriation, infringement of Shell's intellectual property rights here, to hone in on the question goes to this this question that we ask: is this an acceptable parody of what's going on here? And there's, in the analysis, at least in the copyright fair use analysis, there always has to be enough of the ingredient of fakeness to make it an acceptable parody, where it has to be not so realistic that the user can recognize relatively soon in the observation that this is not the real thing, but is actually something else. And so in this situation, we have an additional layer that's put on top of this. This is not only impersonation of Shell in the first instance, but the new layer is it's also an impersonation of Shell's response, trying to make them look a little bit clumsy in their response, or compounding their misunderstanding of social media, which is what's being imitated here as well. And so we've got this traditional analysis that asks the question: is this fake enough? Does it appear fake enough so that it's acceptable and not a misappropriation or an infringement? I would suggest that perhaps, given the entire context of all of this, that analysis might need to be applied a little bit more loosely, because sure, there are still people being duped, but the real attention that this is getting is the fact that it is fake. And because we are so well informed, because situations like this are subject to so much scrutiny by the hundreds of thousands of social media enthusiasts and people who find this stuff interesting, the first time I ever heard about it, and I consider myself to be one who follows these things pretty closely. The first time I heard about it, I was informed of it as it being a fake. So even though looking at it, the four corners of the screen when you're examining it, there may not be much of an indicator there. It's clearly a fake. So maybe the analysis of whether or not it's unacceptable should be done in a more liberal, loose context and on this traditional kind of parody analysis.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't want to have to make these calls as Twitter, who's impersonating and who's parodying and such. Josh, I'm sure you empathize as general counsel.
Yeah, and look, in a prior life, in a public strategies and crisis management practice that I was in for years, this is not an issue that I think the company can win in the courts. I mean, I think going to court over a copyright issue, impersonation, whatever the claims would be, would not win the day. In fact, it would prolong the conversation in exactly the wrong way, looking like the big litigious giant company not meeting head on the substance of the criticism, which is that they're terrible for Arctic wildlife, they drill with abandon, they are polluters, all the things that we hear about big oil. If they really want to get over this, even responding on Twitter in the same venue isn't necessarily going to fix this issue. In fact, it seemed to have caused even more confusion. They need to do something bigger, and if they really are intending to, they need to talk to environmental groups, perhaps in a different way than they have been through their various programs. I'm sure that they have, I would think, for corporate social responsibility and the kind of engagement that you would normally see with a big company with nonprofits, and try to get people who actually believe that they may be doing the right thing to say something on the record, third-party validators. But to just try to fight fire with fire on Twitter is not going to win the day for them, and all of us are still thinking that this campaign was rather ingenious.
I think they need to just sit down and watch Big Miracle a few times and everything will be okay.
It's a great movie.
Yes. Indeed. All right. Well, we've got a tip for you. We've had this tip for you before, but we're going to give it to you again. That tip is, if you haven't locked your phone, you don't have a password on your phone, put one there now. Because obviously there are all kinds of good reasons to do that. But the most recent one is that in a couple of court decisions in Washington State, and who knows, how long these decisions will stay. This is the Intermediate Court of Appeal, and they will be subject to further review. But for the time being, we have precedential court decisions on the book that say that if a police officer has your phone, has good cause to have your phone in his or her possession, they can intercept personal communications intended for you, impersonate you. See, here comes back again at us, and use that to reel in yet more criminals. What happened there? Well, not saying that you're a criminal, but what happened is the police seized the phone of a suspected drug dealer and saw that someone was trying to contact this person. His name was Daniel Lee. There's a great article on this by Timothy Lee at Ars Technica. They responded to that text and they wound up arresting the person who contacted Mr. Lee because the guy, in fact, was trying to score heroin. So the court found that that this kind of communication is no longer private or deserving of constitutional protection. So without going too much further into that, lock your phone, please. If you haven't already done that. Our resource of the week is the World Economic Forum's Personal Data Project, which Josh alluded to earlier. Josh, you're a participant in that. They have a report called Rethinking Personal Data, Strengthening Trust that looks like it's well worth a read. Quick conclusion on that report. What is the World Economic Forum thinking? Are they thinking that data is property and people own it and can monetize it?
Actually, they look at it as more of an access right for individuals. And when you look at the World Economic Forum's membership, you're talking about the biggest companies in the world, as you might imagine, Fortune 500 companies, probably even up to Fortune 1000. But the biggest companies, along with startups around the table for this particular initiative that's been looking at the issue of personal data, how it is handled online, how individuals need to be empowered more with their data, and then that's something that big companies want to see happen as well as governments and regulators. Why is that? Well, the conclusion of this particular or one of the thrusts of this particular report, is that there's an inherent instability in the world of big data today, and it's because of this lack of transparency and lack of security and lack of privacy, this feeling all around that things are not quite in control for individuals, and that if you can give individuals more control of their data, they'll actually share more, which will be better for everybody. So it's a great report. I urge you all to check it out.
Great. Thanks so much for that. And thanks so much for joining us on this episode of This Week in Law. It's been great chatting with you again, Josh.
Great chatting with you, Denise, and great to meet you guys as well, Stephen and Evan.
Great to meet you.
Right on,
too.
Josh. Yeah, same here.
Folks, you can find Josh. He is not impersonating himself over on Twitter. He really is at Josh Galper, also over on Google+, I believe. So you can find him multiple places. And personal, I think, is really intriguing. So as I said, we'll keep an eye on that and your whole space. And hope you'll come back and talk with us about it again.
I would love to. Thanks.
All right. And Stephen, it's been great meeting you and chatting with you today.
Great to talk with all of you. Thank you very much.
All right. Tell us once again, you're at Bone Law in Nashville. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm at a firm called Bone McAllister Norton. It's bonelaw.com. My Twitter handle is my name at Steven Zralek, just like it sounds. No, I'm kidding. Steven with a PH, and then Zralek is Zralek. And I want to just throw out a quick plug for a case to watch, if I have 30 seconds, Denise. We filed a case earlier this week in Nashville that asked the court to declare mobile apps to occupy a different channel of trade than traditional desktop and laptop computers for trademark
Why would
purposes.
they need to do that?
To avoid a claim of infringement. Our opponent began using a mark about, 8 years before our client did. And then our client began using the mark in the mobile app space, but our client was also one of the pioneers. And it was sort of a history lesson for me. I didn't realize that mobile apps really didn't begin until Apple's iTunes store, I think in 2008 or 2009. And our client was one of the very first app developers. And to me, it's just going to be a very interesting case to watch unfold and to see if the court agrees that these do occupy different channels in different spaces, and that two clients with the same name could occupy very different spaces, although they both use the internet and coexist.
Great. Thanks so much. We will keep an eye on that.
I would think that you'd even have some other DuPont factors to argue on that. The nature of the services are different because, you're out and about, and the purchasers of desktop software might be more or less sophisticated than a mobile app purchaser if it's just an inexpensive app. So that sounds interesting. And there's plenty of case law that says the internet is just not one channel of trade.
Exactly.
Research on that.
Yeah, Evan, I think are you open for hire as an expert witness?
Oh, yeah. So I'll send you an engagement letter.
I'm kidding, but you're the exact. I wish that you were my judge. You're great. So hopefully they'll think the same way.
Right on.
All right,
Sounds
Evan, thanks.
Good luck.
Thanks so much, too, for all your thoughts and insights today. It's been great
thanks
chatting with you.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thanks for having me back. Making a pattern out of it. Really good to talk about all this stuff, and good to talk with you, Josh and Stephen. Nice to meet you.
And let's see what happens in the elections and if this becomes an issue or not. So great talking with all of y'all. Have a very good weekend.
Right on.
Thanks, you too. And we'll see you all hopefully on the next episode of This Week in Law. Thanks so much for joining us today.